I want to now bring in former federal prosecutors Joseph Moreno and Ankush Khardori, I'm glad that both of you are here tonight. First of all, if you're Hunter Biden, you're looking at your attorneys and probably saying to yourself, what happened from the time that we thought we had a plea deal, everything signed, sealed, delivered, it was mine, to this point in time, and now you got the special counsel. The big question everyone's asking, of course, is why do you think this has happened now? Is it appropriate, do you think, that Merrick Garland has appointed David Weiss to now really elevate him to that special counsel status? What do you guys think?
I mean, I think it was the best of a bunch of bad options. I mean, frankly, I used to cringe when the White House press secretary would say that that David Weiss is independent. Because, look, that might be very well the case, and I have no reason to say it's not. But there's a simple way to indicate that independence, and that's designating him as a special counsel. And one of the criteria you mentioned is there a conflict of interest? Well, what more a conflict of interest could you have than when the son of the president is being investigated? So I think it is long overdue. I think it's a good move. I think it deflects a little bit of the criticism, but I'm not sure it really makes a difference at this point. It might just be form over substance.
Now, you know, we've all been prosecutors. The notion of independence, people might say, hold on, if you're a U.S. attorney, then aren't you independent? You're the one that's the head honcho, the sort of buck stops there. But really, they are answering to the attorney general, who is going to not dictate the day-to-day, but certainly the priorities of the department and going on. But they're much more removed than, say, an appointee. But to his larger point, Ankush, I mean, look, this would be as a special counsel. Now you get to go outside your jurisdiction, right? This is not just the Delaware U.S. attorney any longer. He can bring it other places if he wants to. And they've named already maybe California, maybe Washington, D.C. What do you think?
Yeah, you know, the papers that they filed in court today were surprisingly forward and candid about what happened and what they intend to do, right? They said in the tax case, plea deal fell apart. We intend to charge this case out in California with the same charges, maybe more, and we think that this case is going to trial. And that may not be the last that we hear from the special counsel, right? There's, you know, other sort of issues that have been floating around, and it's really not clear still to this day whether this investigation is really over or not, and whether we're at the last stage or whether they're still looking at stuff.
Right, that was part of the judge's moment, right, when this whole thing imploded, to say in the courtroom, wait, you haven't actually realized whether this is going to be a 360, it's going to conclude every investigation. That was part of the holdup. But listen to what Hunter Biden's attorneys had to say earlier on our airwaves about this idea of, I wonder if something else is coming into play. Listen.
After 5 years of what has to be one of the most thorough investigations that office has ever done, started by a Republican attorney general, given to a Republican U.S. attorney, using a experienced career set of prosecutors, thought that the only charges that were appropriate would be 2 misdemeanor failure to file charges and a diverted gun charge for the 11 days that Hunter possessed a gun. And that was after 5 years of a painstaking investigation. So whatever his title is and whatever happens next, we're confident that that should be the same conclusion. And if it's not, then something other than the facts and the law has come into play.
I mean, he's more than intimating the potential impact of politics. We've seen many people question Hunter Biden. The term sweetheart deal has come up so often, it's almost become synonymous with the entire conversation. Do you think politics has come into play here in a significant way for his decision to elevate him?
Hey, look, Abiola is very well respected in the white-collar community, and of course he's going to advocate for his client.
Right.
But, I mean, you know, don't take my word for it. I mean, this looked lenient going into that plea agreement meeting, but the judge herself kicked it out. I mean, she said, as she asked the prosecutor, apparently on the spot, have you ever done anything like this before? And the prosecutor had to admit, no, I haven't. So I think they went too far, and I think they should have been prepared to answer questions they were clearly unprepared to answer. So you asked, what do you think Hunter Biden was going through his head? Probably pretty darn frustrated, because clearly his lawyers and the prosecutors were not ready to answer the judge's skeptical questions, and that's when she said, I'm not comfortable with this.
Yeah, it was really a remarkable hearing, I have to say, because the issues that came up were very predictable, right? And, you know, we are all familiar with plea hearings that fall apart. They don't ever, at least in my humble experience, fall apart on legal issues that the lawyers could have anticipated. It's usually because the defendant can't get around to allocuting properly or whatever.
Right.
In terms of whether, like, politics is at play here, you know, obviously this is a politically charged case, given the nature of the defendant. I tend to still put a fair amount of faith into Merrick Garland to make these decisions without wanting to influence sort of the national political scene, and I still sort of hold that presupposition. I wrote a profile of him for Politico early this year where I spent a lot of time talking to his former colleagues and clerks and stuff, and that really stuck with me. And you can make, question his judgment in this area, and I think it has not been great the way this has been handled over time. I don't think it's really about helping Joe Biden as a political matter, though.
The political cynics among us might say, bless your heart, for a moment on that. Everyone stand by. It's interesting, back at the table right now, the warning was, look, if you want to keep talking about it, you think you can't get a fair trial and you want to kind of air it out in the court of public opinion, we're going to have the trial that much sooner. That's kind of the old, be careful what you wish for. I might give you precisely what you're asking for. What do you think of that?
Laura, I mean, I've been a defense counsel and I've had difficult clients, but I can only imagine how frustrating it must be to have a client like Donald Trump who just cannot be contained. He's his worst enemy. And I actually think the hearing was generally positive for him. I think the judge gave him a lot of latitude and said only highly sensitive topics you can't share. I think it's going to be extremely difficult for him to control himself. So, look, we've seen defendants waiting trial who get their liberties revoked because they do things like say things that could be construed as intimidating witnesses or trying to taint a jury pool. And usually they're not a former president running again for president.
With this platform or with the megaphone that he'll have. On the other hand, now let's just flip that around, Kush, because maybe if you're his defense counsel, you want him talking. You want to muddy the waters. You want to be able to try to suggest that this is political speech. And what is a candidate, for the reasons he talked about, what is he to do besides criticize what he perceives might remove him from the campaign trail? Is that square?
Yeah, I mean, look, he is a singular defendant in this regard, right? Because his ability to speak in a mass way to all of America allows him to do a couple of things, both advance his campaign along this theory, and of course, if he wins re-election, manages to get the nomination and defeat Joe Biden, he can shut all of this down once he's in office. But it also allows him to speak to prospective jurors, right? Which is not sort of as impactful necessarily in D.C., where the composition of the voter pool is more favorable to much more favorable to Biden than to Trump, as in Florida. But I do think that's part of what's going on here. And I have to say, I thought what the judge did was quite clever, actually, because I think if she had suggested that there would be a gag order coming, or that she would revoke or impose harsher conditions on him, that would have caused an uproar. And instead, she said, you know what, if this is your issue, then we're just going to accelerate the trial. And that actually, I think, is something that will have some effect on him.
Some kind of reverse judicial psychology, kind of the mind games are happening right now. But, it's interesting, given the fact that this is the third indictment, and obviously one is at the state level and two federal, but you got to wonder how precise you'd need to be able to connect the dots in such a way that the judge overseeing a particular case would say, aha, you're talking about my case. That statement you just made on Truth Social, you must be talking about this one. You almost can imagine a fact-finding mission playing out that way for a judge to have to say, this maybe otherwise vague statement that could apply to all of them applies to this case. So I wonder if they're going to figure out what to do next. Gentlemen, always a pleasure seeing you on a Friday night, and I'm glad that you're here, and I'm not going to butcher your name again, Kush, okay? I promise you I will not. Nice to see you.
Thanks, Laura.
Ahead,